Today, I want to talk about one of the most ambitious games of the past decade, Crimson Desert. Now, in case you don't know, Crimson Desert is the brand new single-player RPG from Pearl Abyss, the developers of Black Desert Online and MMO. This time, Pearl Abyss has decided to go completely single-player and have decided to also go balls to the wall, stuffing every feature, system, and a massive open world into this game. Look, to be honest, I would be lying if I said I wasn't incredibly excited for this game. This game's ambition rivaled those of games like Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077. Pearl Abyss has been dropping gameplay overviews on YouTube, talking about the world, the gameplay, and the progression, and all of it from their videos looks incredibly good. But at the same time, I can't help but be skeptical. You see, ambition like this is absolutely amazing when it does pan out. You get games like Witcher 3, Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption, and Kingdom Come Deliverance when that ambition largely matches the output of the studio. But in many ways, that has not been the case for Pearl Abyss. Their last game was an MMO. This is a completely new undertaking for them with being a single-player RPG, and they are promising the world. There's a world out there where you absolutely can be too ambitious, and the game crumbles under the weight of that ambition. So today, let's break down all the information we have on Crimson Desert. Let's sift through the BS and determine what's actually going to be good and what seems a little too good to be true. And let's ultimately answer the question, is Crimson Desert going to be one of the best games of the past decade, or will it crash and burn under the weight of its own ambition? Before we begin, if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that like button and please consider subscribing to see more content like this. We've got tons more coming up, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And yeah, back to the video. So going off some of the information that we've gained from these past two gameplay overviews, a lot of it looks incredibly good, don't get me wrong. But it's also supposed to look incredibly good. This is coming from Pearl Abyss themselves, so all of this gameplay is going to be curated. Everything is going to look amazing. The graphics are gonna look great. The gameplay is gonna look speedy and flashy, and the world is gonna look vast and filled to the brim with things to do. But it's important to sift through that BS, sift through what Pearl Abyss is actually saying and what they're actually showing in these videos. So let's kind of break down what we've seen so far. I think the number one thing that you can glean from these videos is that the open world looks incredibly vast, and it's quite possibly one of the biggest open worlds I've ever seen in a game. From cities to valleys to deserts to mountains, it almost feels like a Skyrim level map with tons of things to do. There's a city in the clouds as well, which is used in the story, and all of it just looks so fantastic. They've shown multiple shots of you just standing over this massive valley, seeing the different biomes in the distance, and it's kind of that Skyrim level feeling where anywhere you can see, you can go explore. And all of that does sound really, really good, but I do think the world feels a little too vast. I have no doubt that the areas in and around the hubs and the cities will be packed with things to do, but it's kind of the space in between, the space that allows you to really connect with the game outside of the story that's just also just as important. And I think the vastness of the world could hurt this department. They've shown tons of things, they've shown tons of points of interest throughout the map, but they've also only shown those points of interest. They don't really take the time to let you explore in between those spaces. And when they do show those spaces, it's usually done with a really quick traversal method. There's gliding and flying in this game, along with horseback riding. And every time they've shown traversal as a whole, they've shown it with the flying/gliding mechanic, which is a lot quicker than riding on the ground on horseback. What this really leads me to believe is that I kind of feel like there's not a lot of things to do with the space in between points of interest. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's going to be quite a few points of interest on the map, but if you do want them to be all handcrafted and all really meaningful to explore, you're not going to be able to add as much of those as opposed to going the Starfield method with procedurally generated points of interest. Don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for Pearl Abyss to make a procedural generated world. That is absolutely not what what I want. But my point is that there's going to be fewer points of interest that are handcrafted than if they were to just do a procedurally generated world. And with the vastness of the world that they're really detailing here, I mean, this world looks huge. This world is bigger than the level of Red Dead Redemption 2 and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. From what we've seen, this world is gargantuan. And I'm just nervous about having a lot of stuff to explore in between the cities. Every time they've shown the gliding, which is a really quick way to get around, and that's not really taking into account the space in between those points of interest. So I'm kind of curious to see if there's actually things worth exploring in those spaces in between, or is this kind of like a Fallout scenario where you kind of just want to fast travel to the points of interest and not really worry about the space in between? Look, beyond the world itself, I think Pearl Abyss is really going balls to the wall with the cinematics in this game. For an RPG, they have showcased a lot of cinematics, whether that's fighting or really cool cutscenes. There's a lot more here than the RPG typical standing and talking. Even Witcher 3, which I would consider a pretty cinematic game, all things considered, did have a lot of standing and talking. And don't get me wrong, I do think Crimson Desert is gonna have a lot of standing and talking scenes, but they've also shown quite a bit of acted, like mocap cutscenes as well, which is kind of a cool thing to add. There's not a lot of RPGs out there right now that kind of do that full cutscene acting. Even games like Outer Worlds 2 from guys like Obsidian don't really have those. And if they do, they're either front-loaded in the beginning of the game or back-loaded in the end of the game. They're not really kind of spaced in between. So I'm curious to see if Pearl Abyss is actually going to take the time to add like fully acted cutscenes throughout the game, or are the ones that they're showing just the ones in the beginning and the end, and in between is kind of like any other RPG. But look, man, I really can't deny that the graphics just look phenomenal. Everything from the lighting to the foliage to the mountains to the draw distance to the particle effects all look so good. But again, you have to call in the fact that maybe the graphics look a little too good. What I mean by this is the game going to be optimized? The game they've shown repeatedly is incredibly vast, but I'd rather take an optimized game than a vast game that runs like crap. So I'm curious to see, and I really hope that the game is optimized, because frankly, that's going to make it or break it for a lot of people. This world may be beautiful and this world may be vast and it might have all the coolest and newest tech and the particle effects and the foliage, but if the optimization isn't there, if this game struggles to run on lower end hardware while not really excelling with higher end hardware, you kind of have to call into question what they were doing all this time. Did they spend more time making the game look cool, or did they spend more time optimizing the game for everyone to play? Another thing that I kind of noticed that isn't really an RPG typical is that there's no really create a character here. You play as Cliff and two other protagonists throughout the game, and so you kind of don't have much customization in terms of how they look other than their armor sets, I believe. So again, kind of a bummer there. That is kind of a staple of RPG games. I know there's games out there like Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk that kind of have an established character, but even in Cyberpunk, you could customize what he or she looked like. Obviously, Witcher has a main character in Geralt, and everyone loves Geralt. But if you're going to take away the ability to customize your own character, the main protagonists have to be incredibly interesting. And Pearl Abyss separating their protagonists into 3 separate ones is a bit of a red flag to me. I'm kind of nervous to see how deep these protagonists really are, if we're going to be like switching between them. Obviously, GTA did this in an incredibly great way, but GTA is made by Rockstar, a game developer that has thousands and thousands of people and seemingly infinite money. Pearl Abyss is not Rockstar, and their game seems a lot more vast and has a lot more systems and features than a GTA game. So if they're going to go the route of not being able to create your own character and adding 3 protagonists on top of that, you have to make sure those protagonists are fleshed out. Otherwise, it's not going to really be interesting to a lot of people. Pearl Abyss also went to talk a little bit about questing, and to be honest, it seemed pretty cut and dry. They talked that there'll be main quests, there'll be side quests, and there'll be some puzzles thrown in there. And to be honest, I don't really love just hearing that. I understand that this is an incredibly big game and there's a lot of systems and features, and I'm sure that this game is a lot more about exploration and combat than it is about story and questing. But at the end of the day, this game is an RPG, and games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Expedition 33 are kind of built on incredibly interesting stories with branching paths. Expedition 33 may not have had a branching path, but it was still a phenomenal RPG when it came to the story aspect that kind of was the catalyst of the game as you moved along. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is one of the most open-ended RPGs ever. You have a multitude of ways to finish every single quest you can, and on top of that, every single one of those quests kind of offer a different ending if you were to complete it one way versus another. They don't really talk about that here. Pearl Abyss doesn't really mention anything about branching paths and a branching narrative. It's pretty cut and dry, which I'm not sure I love. Obviously, I played a lot of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, but I've also played a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 recently, and while I'm not really expecting Baldur's Gate 3 levels of abilities to do whatever you want, that game kind of goes balls to the wall in that aspect in a way that I'm not sure even I love. Sometimes I felt like I was just doing stuff without direction, and I get that's the point of the game, but still, like, it was even less hand-holding than Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is not very hand-holding at all to begin with. I'm not sure I want that level of open-ended quest, but I do want some open-endedness, and Pearl Abyss kind of didn't mention that at all. They kind of just kept it pretty cut and dry with, yeah, these are the main quests, these are the side quests. There's some factions thrown in there, kind of like Skyrim or other Bethesda RPGs, where you kind of do quests for factions, you build up trust with them, and then maybe you get some rewards. But other than that, that's all they really talked about, and that was a bit of a disappointment. As someone who is incredibly excited for this game and is incredibly excited to explore this world and engage in the combat, that's another aspect of an RPG that's absolutely crucial to me. Is there a variety in the quests and the side quests? Because if there's not, what's the incentive to replay an RPG? The last thing I kind of want to talk about is the combat. Now, this was the aspect that they kind of showed the least. It was like a 9-minute video, which is interesting, and it did show some cool things, but it's really more about how flashy and cool the combat is and all the different abilities you can use versus actually explaining how the combat worked. It's incredibly fast and fluid. It doesn't really seem like a Souls-like in any way, shape, or form, and that's good. I'm not really expecting that from this game, but I am curious because I don't think I've ever really played a game with a combat system like this. Witcher 3 really only had like 2 to 3 enemies attacking you at any given time, maybe 5 to 6, and the combat itself was pretty bare bones. Crimson Desert seems more advanced than that, while also kind of seemingly feeling less advanced. It seems a lot more like hack and slashy versus like a little more tactical, which I'm curious to see if it ends up working out in their favor or not. That's not really a style of game I play a lot, but I am curious to try it out. And to be honest with you, I think the progression was a complete dud in the video that they showed. They kind of just explained like, yeah, you're going to find these artifacts out in the wild. They're going to help you increase your agility and your strength and maybe give you extra abilities. And on top of that, you have some armor and weapon customization and upgradability. It was incredibly light on information, and that's fine. Like, I understand that they want to keep stuff for the actual game itself and the game's release, but Pearl Abyss has not been shy about showcasing this game since the beginning. This game has been getting really deep and in-depth gameplay videos since like last year, June. So I'm kind of curious to see why they kind of kept that a little bit of a secret. I would assume if they had something cool to show, they would have shown it. And they kind of just glossed over the progression, which makes me feel like this is a lot more of an RPG light than an actual RPG. So yeah, in conclusion, I know it seemed like I was kind of dogging on Crimson Desert a little bit. Trust me, I'm not. I am incredibly excited for this game, but the more info comes out about this game, the more I'm starting to realize that I think this game is less of a traditional RPG and more of an action RPG light. What Pearl Abyss has talked about with the progression, the combat, and especially the questing, I've kind of gotten the sense that this game is a lot more akin to the likes of Assassin's Creed Origins than it is akin to the likes of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or even Witcher 3. It might have a similar setting as Witcher 3, and it might have a similar idea of immersion as Kingdom Come Deliverance, but it's not really incorporating the RPG elements of those games. The progression, they basically didn't touch on at all. They just explained that there are artifacts out in the wild that you could collect to upgrade your agility and strength and things like that. The combat seems a little less tactical and much more fluid, which, is something that an RPG can do, but it's not as likely. They're traditionally a lot more like tactical when it comes to gameplay. And then on top of that, the questing was just completely cut and dry. They kind of just explained like, yeah, you're going to have some faction quests. You're going to have some main quests. You're going to do them. They're going to ask for different things, but they didn't really explain like you can complete these quests in different ways if you want. So if you're going to kind of equate this to any kind of game or any type of studio that makes these types of games, I'm going to equate it to Bethesda. Now, don't get me wrong, Bethesda does it like Bethesda does it, and no one else can do it like them. Games like Skyrim and Fallout 4 and Fallout New Vegas are iconic games that have a very specific style that no one has really ever been able to match in terms of scope and scale. And I think that Crimson Desert is really gunning for the likes of that as opposed to gunning for the likes of Witcher 3 or Cyberpunk or something like that. This game is definitely light on the RPG elements and much more about the exploration and the world in between. And to be honest, I'm fine with that. Bethesda makes great games. Aside from Starfield, which was a bit of a dud if you ask some, they've had a pretty great track record. Skyrim, Oblivion, Fallout 4, New Vegas, Fallout 3, all those games are incredibly good and hold up to this day. And I think Crimson Desert wants to get a slice of that as opposed to getting a slice of a game like Witcher 3. I know this game is third person like Witcher 3, but I don't think that that's the kind of game that they're modeling their game after. So setting those expectations early on, I think, would be incredibly important for me and for anyone watching this, because I really don't think that they're wanting to go for something as in-depth as some games that maybe would be traditionally compared to this game because of its third-person action RPG sense. But either way, I am still incredibly excited for this game. Let me know down below your thoughts on Crimson Desert. Are you excited to play it? Are you not excited to play it? Honestly, I just hope it's optimized. From what I've seen, they've been very transparent on what to expect with this game, and I am excited for what they've presented. I just want it to be optimized. So yeah, let me know down below your thoughts on Crimson Desert. Again, if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that like button, and please consider subscribing to see more content like this. It's been CGG. I'm out.